Back in October of 2008, up in the Cascade foothills near Darrington, Washington, I was 71 and living alone in the cabin my wife and I had built 40 years before. She'd been gone 3 years by then. The morning I found the basket, the fog was so thick I couldn't see past the porch railing. I remember the smell hit me first, wet fur, musk, something wild I couldn't place. Inside was a baby, not human. I know what people think when they hear Bigfoot. I thought the same thing for most of my life. But I kept that creature for 2 weeks, and I've got footage on an old camcorder I've never shown anyone. I thought the worst part would be the video. It wasn't. The cabin sat on a low ridge, hemlock and Douglas fir pressing in on 3 sides, a gravel track winding down 2 miles to the county road. I'd stopped driving into town except for groceries every other week. The silence had become a kind of companion. I'd wake at dawn, make coffee on the propane stove, sit on the porch, and watch the mist burn off the valley. That morning, October 23rd, the fog stayed. It clung to the trees like wet wool, muffling everything. I stepped outside in my slippers, mug in hand, and nearly kicked the basket. It was woven, crude, looked like someone had braided cedar bark and fern stems together. I bent down, knees protesting, and caught that smell again. Not rotten, not exactly animal. Something in between. The basket had a cloth laid over the top, some kind of hide, soft and dark. I pulled it back. The baby was maybe the size of a house cat, curled on its side, breathing slow and shallow. Its fur was dark, almost black, matted in places. The face was flatter than a bear cub's, the eyes closed, tiny fingers curled against its chest. I stood there for a long time, just staring, the fog drifting past, the forest silent around me. I don't even like saying Bigfoot, but that's what it was. I looked around, half expecting someone to step out of the trees, laughing, telling me it was a joke. But there was nothing, just the pines and the fog and the faint creak of branches overhead. I picked up the basket, carried it inside, and set it on the kitchen table. The baby didn't wake. I sat across from it, drinking my coffee, trying to think. My first thought was to call the sheriff's office down in Darrington, but I stopped. Sheriff Haynes was a practical man. He dealt with lost hikers and drunk hunters and the occasional meth cook in the back country. He wouldn't believe me. And if he did, what would he do? Take it to Fish and Wildlife? Put it in a cage? The baby stirred, made a soft sound, almost like a kitten mewing. I found an old blanket, wrapped it up, and moved it to the couch. It settled again, breathing steady. I watched it for an hour, maybe 2, before I finally stood and walked to the window. The fog was starting to lift. I could see the tree line now, the dark wall of forest that stretched up the slope behind the cabin. Somewhere out there, something had left this baby on my porch. That first night, I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on, sat in the rocking chair near the couch, and listened. The cabin was full of small noises, the creak of old wood settling, the hiss of the propane heater, the rustle of the baby shifting in its blanket. Around midnight, I heard something else. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, against the front door. I froze. The sound echoed in the stillness, then stopped. I waited, pulse hammering in my ears, but nothing came after. I didn't get up. I didn't open the door. I just sat there, staring at the wood panels until the sky began to lighten. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a branch, or maybe a deer brushing against the porch. But when I stepped outside, I saw the prints. They were in the soft dirt near the steps, too big to be a boot, too deep to be anything light. 5 toes, a broad heel, spaced like something walking upright. I measured one with my hand. It was twice as long as my palm. I followed them to the edge of the clearing, where they disappeared into the underbrush. The forest was quiet. No birds, no wind, just the faint drip of moisture falling from the branches. I went back inside and locked the door. The baby was awake, sitting up in the blanket, watching me. Its eyes were dark, almost black, and there was an intelligence in them that made my skin prickle. I warmed some milk on the stove, diluted it with water, and offered it in a shallow bowl. The baby sniffed, then lapped at it, awkward but determined. I should have called someone then. I know that now. But I didn't. I told myself I needed more time to think, to figure out what to do. The truth was, I didn't want to let it go. My wife and I had raised 2 sons in this cabin. They were grown now, living on the other side of the state, busy with their own families. The house had been empty for so long. That was mistake number 1. Over the next few days, the baby grew stronger. It started crawling, then pulling itself up on the furniture, so wobbling on legs that seemed too long for its body. It made noises, soft grunts and chirps, sometimes a low hum that vibrated in my chest. It followed me around the cabin, clinging to my pant leg when I tried to move. I started calling it the kid, just in my head. It felt wrong to name it, but I couldn't keep thinking of it as the baby forever. On the 10th day, I left the cabin to fetch water from the creek. I was gone maybe 20 minutes. When I came back, the front door was wide open. The kid was gone. I dropped the water bucket and ran outside, calling without words, just a hoarse shout that scared a pair of crows from the trees. The clearing was empty. I circled the cabin, checked the shed, the woodpile, the narrow path that led down to the creek. Nothing. Then I saw the tracks. Not the kid's small prints, but the big ones. They came out of the forest on the north side, crossed the clearing in long strides, and stopped at the porch. Then they turned back, and next to them, small prints, stumbling, trying to keep up. I followed them into the trees. The underbrush was thick, salal and vine maple tangled together, but the tracks were clear in the soft earth. I pushed through, branches scraping my arms, my breath coming fast. I'm not a young man. My knees ached, my chest burned, but I kept going. The trail led uphill, winding through the timber until it opened into a small clearing. And there, sitting on a fallen log, was the kid. Next to it, standing perfectly still, was a Bigfoot. I stopped. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was easily 8 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, covered in dark fur that looked almost black in the shadows. Its face was wide, flat, the eyes deep set and calm. It looked at me not with fear or aggression, but with something I can only describe as patience. The kid chirped, reached up, and the Bigfoot lowered its hand. The kid grabbed a finger, held on tight. We stood there, the 3 of us, in the quiet of the forest. I don't know how long, maybe a minute, maybe 10. Then the Bigfoot took a step back, still holding the kid's hand, and the kid looked at me one last time before turning and following it into the trees. I didn't try to stop them. I just stood there, watching, until they disappeared into the shadows. When I got back to the cabin, the door was still open, swinging slightly in the breeze. I closed it, locked it, and sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were shaking. I poured myself a whiskey, drank it in one swallow, and poured another. That night, the 3 knocks came again. I didn't open the door. I didn't look out the window. I just sat in the dark, listening, until they stopped. The next morning, I found a basket on the porch. Not the same one. This one was newer, tightly woven, filled with wild mushrooms and a handful of hazelnuts. I brought it inside and set it on the table. I didn't call the sheriff. I didn't tell my sons. I just went back to my routine, coffee on the porch, splitting wood, listening to the wind in the trees. But the knocks kept coming. Every few nights, always 3, slow and deliberate. I never opened the door. By mid-November, the first snow had dusted the ridge. The knocks had become a rhythm, almost expected. I'd be reading or washing dishes or lying in bed, and they'd come. 3 of them, evenly spaced, then silence. I stopped jumping at the sound. I started to think of it as a kind of check-in, a way of saying, "We're still here." I didn't see the kid again, but I saw signs, small handprints in the frost on the porch railing. A carved stick left by the woodpile, the bark stripped in a spiral pattern. Once, a feather, black and iridescent, tucked into the crack of the doorframe. I kept them all in a shoebox under my bed. One afternoon, I was splitting wood when I heard a truck coming up the gravel track. I set down the axe and waited. It was Dale Haynes, the sheriff, driving his old Ford with the county seal on the door. He pulled up, cut the engine, and stepped out, adjusting his hat. "John," he said, nodding. "Dale. Been a while. Wanted to check in. Make sure you're doing all right up here." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Doing fine. Just the usual." He looked around, his gaze lingering on the trees. "You see anything strange lately? We've had a few calls from folks over near Oso. Livestock spooked. Somebody said they saw prints." I kept my face neutral. "Prints?" "Big ones. Probably just a bear getting ready to den up, but you know how people get. Start talking about Bigfoot, all that nonsense." I shrugged. "Haven't seen anything." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right. You need anything, you call, all right?" "Will do." He got back in his truck and turned around, gravel crunching under the tires. I watched him go, then went back to the woodpile. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. That night, the knocks came earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard them. I turned off the stove and walked to the door. I stood there, my hand on the knob, listening. Nothing. Just the wind and the creak of the porch boards. I opened the door. The clearing was empty, but the smell was there. That musk, sharp and wild. I stepped out onto the porch, my breath fogging in the cold air. The moon was nearly full, casting long shadows across the snow. And then I saw it. At the edge of the trees, just beyond the light, a shape. Tall, broad, perfectly still. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, looking back. It watched me for a long moment, then turned and walked into the forest, its footsteps silent on the snow. I went back inside, locked the door, and didn't sleep until dawn. The smell got worse. By early December, it was constant, a thick, pungent odor that clung to the cabin and the clearing around it. I'd wake up, and it would be there, seeping in through the cracks in the walls. I started keeping the windows closed, even though it made the cabin stuffy and close. I knew what it meant. They were close, watching, waiting. I started seeing the tracks more often, not just around the cabin, but down by the creek near the shed, even on the roof. I'd hear footsteps at night, heavy and deliberate, circling the house. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the boards creak overhead. One morning, I found a deer carcass at the edge of the clearing. It had been gutted cleanly, the hide peeled back, the meat stripped from the bones. There were prints all around it, some small, some massive. I buried what was left and tried not to think about it. That week, a ranger came by. Her name was Martinez, a young woman with a no-nonsense air and a clipboard. She said there'd been reports of unusual activity in the area. Strange sounds, sightings, missing livestock. She asked if I'd heard or seen anything. I told her no. She frowned, made a note on her clipboard. "You sure? Because folks down in Darrington are pretty spooked. Someone even said they heard screams up this way." "Just coyotes," I said. "They get loud this time of year." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. She gave me her card, told me to call if anything changed, and drove off. I threw the card in the trash. That night, the knocks came again. But this time, they were different. Not 3 slow raps, but a rapid drumming, urgent and insistent. I went to the door, hesitated, then opened it. The kid was on the porch, and alone. It looked up at me, its dark eyes wide, and made a sound I'd never heard before, a low, keening whine that raised the hair on the back of my neck. It reached up, grabbed my hand, and pulled. I followed. It led me into the trees, moving fast, glancing back to make sure I was keeping up. We went uphill through the thick underbrush until we reached a rocky outcrop. The kid stopped, pointed. There, wedged between two boulders, was another Bigfoot. This one was smaller, slumped against the rock, its breathing shallow and labored. There was blood on its fur, dark and slick in the moonlight. I knelt down, not sure what to do. The creature's eyes opened, focused on me. It made a sound, soft and guttural, almost like speech. The kid chirped, touched the injured Bigfoot's arm, then looked at me, waiting. I didn't know how to help. No, but I stayed there in the cold until the injured Bigfoot's breathing steadied and it finally closed its eyes. I went back to the cabin, got a blanket and a canteen of water, and returned to the outcrop. The kid was still there, curled against the injured Bigfoot's side. I draped the blanket over them, left the water within reach, and sat down on a nearby rock. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even good with animals. But I couldn't leave them. The night stretched on, cold and clear. I dozed in fits, waking every time I heard a sound. Around dawn, the big Bigfoot, the one I'd seen before, stepped out of the shadows. It looked at me, then at the injured one, and made a low, rumbling sound. The kid chirped in response. The big Bigfoot knelt, touched the injured one's shoulder. Jan then stood and looked at me. It didn't speak, but I understood. It nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture, and I nodded back. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees. I stayed until the sun was fully up, then made my way back to the cabin. My legs were stiff, my back aching, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. Over the next few days, I kept checking on them. I'd bring food, jerky, bread, whatever I had, and leave it by the rocks. The kid would take it, share it with the injured Bigfoot, and chirp at me in what I took to be thanks. The injured one was healing, slowly. It started sitting up, then standing, leaning heavily on the kid and the big Bigfoot when they came to check in. I started to see more of them, not just the big one and the kid, but others. A female, taller and leaner, with lighter fur. On a juvenile, smaller than the big one, but still massive. They moved through the forest like ghosts, silent and careful, always watching. And the smell, the musk, became a kind of signature. I'd catch it on the wind and know they were near. One evening, I was sitting on the porch when the big Bigfoot walked into the clearing. It didn't hide, didn't hesitate. It just came right up to the porch steps and stopped. I stood, my heart pounding. It reached into the pouch it wore. I hadn't noticed it before, woven from bark and sinew, and pulled something out. A piece of carved wood, smooth and polished, shaped like a bird in flight. It held it out to me. I took it, my hands trembling. The Bigfoot watched me for a long moment, then turned and walked back into the trees. I looked down at the carving, ran my fingers over the smooth surface. It was beautiful, intricate, made with care. I went inside, set it on the mantel, and stared at it until the light faded. That night, the knocks came again. I opened the door, and there was a basket. Inside were more carvings, a bundle of dried berries, and a small woven pouch filled with seeds. I brought it in and closed the door, smiling for the first time in months. Winter settled in hard. The snow piled up, 2 feet, then 3, and the gravel track became impassable. I was snowed in, alone with my supplies and my thoughts. But I wasn't lonely. Every few days, I'd find something on the porch, a bundle of firewood neatly stacked, or a rabbit carcass, skinned and ready to cook. Once, a basket of roots still fresh that I boiled into a stew. The knocks came less often, but when they did, I'd open the door and leave out what I could spare: coffee grounds, sugar, a bit of salt. Small things. They always took them. One night, in the middle of January, I woke to a sound I'd never heard before. It was a voice, low and resonant, almost like singing. It came from the trees, rising and falling in a rhythm that made my chest ache. I got up, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch. The snow glowed in the moonlight, and the forest was alive with sound, not just one voice, but many, layering over each other, creating a harmony that seemed to fill the valley. I stood there, listening, until the song faded into silence. The next morning, I found the kid on the porch. It was bigger now, nearly the size of a small dog, its fur thick and glossy. It looked up at me and chirped, then turned and walked toward the tree line. I followed. It led me deep into the forest, farther than I'd gone before, to a place where the trees grew close together and the ground was carpeted with moss. There, in the center of a natural clearing, was a circle of stones. In the middle of the circle was a fire, still smoldering, and around it, sitting cross-legged, were 5 Bigfoot. They looked up when I approached. The big one, the female, the juvenile, the injured one, now healed, and one I hadn't seen before, older, its fur graying at the edges. The kid sat down next to the old one, and they all looked at me. I didn't know what to do. I stood there, awkward and out of place, until the old Bigfoot gestured toward an empty spot in the circle. I sat. We stayed like that, in silence, as the fire burned down to embers. So then the old Bigfoot spoke. Its voice was deep, guttural, but there were words in it, sounds that shaped meaning even if I couldn't understand them. The others responded, one by one, their voices blending into a kind of conversation. I didn't speak. I just listened. When the fire went out, the old Bigfoot stood, placed a hand on my shoulder, and made a sound that felt like gratitude. Then they all stood and walked into the trees, the kid trailing behind, looking back at me one last time. I sat there until the cold seeped through my clothes, then made my way back to the cabin. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But I kept the carvings, the baskets, the memory of that circle in the snow. By spring, the snow had melted, and the forest came alive with new growth. The knocks had stopped. I didn't see the Bigfoot anymore. I didn't find baskets or carvings on the porch. The cabin felt empty again, the silence heavier than before. I tried to go back to my old routine, coffee on the porch, splitting wood, reading in the evenings. But everything felt different. The forest had shown me something, and I couldn't unsee it. In March, I got a call from my son, David. He wanted to know if I was all right, if I needed anything. I told him I was fine, just the usual. He said he'd come visit in the summer, bring the grandkids. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. That afternoon, I went for a walk. I followed the trail to the outcrop where I'd first found the injured Bigfoot. The blanket was still there, folded neatly, placed on top of a flat rock. Next to it was the canteen, empty but clean. I picked them up and brought them back to the cabin. On that night, I heard a sound outside. Not knocks, but a low hoot like an owl. I went to the window and looked out. The big Bigfoot was standing at the edge of the clearing, the kid next to it. They watched the cabin for a moment, then turned and walked into the trees. I didn't follow. I just stood there, watching, until they disappeared. The next morning, I found a single footprint in the dirt near the porch. It was fresh, deep, and inside it, someone had placed a smooth, white stone. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. It was cool and heavy, worn smooth by water. I put it in my pocket and went inside. That was the last time I saw them. It's been 5 years now. I'm 76, still living in the cabin, still splitting wood and drinking coffee on the porch. The forest is quiet again, but sometimes, late at night, I hear the knocks, 3 of them, slow and deliberate, echoing through the trees. I don't open the door anymore. I just listen and remember. I've thought about telling someone, My sons, maybe, or a reporter, or one of those Bigfoot researchers who come through the area every summer. But I don't. It's not my story to tell. It's theirs. I still have the video. I filmed it that first week on an old camcorder I'd used to record my grandkids' birthday parties. It shows the kid sitting on my couch eating berries from a bowl. It's shaky, grainy, but you can see it clearly. The dark fur, the wide eyes, the small hands. I've watched it maybe a dozen times. Every time I think about uploading it, posting it somewhere, proving to the world that Bigfoot is real. But I never do. Because once it's out there, it's not just a video. It's a target, and I won't do that to them. So I keep it on a shelf, in a box with the carvings and the baskets and the white stone. Reminders of a time when the forest opened up and showed me something most people will never see. I'm not asking you to believe me. I wouldn't if I were you. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that somewhere out there, in the deep woods, Bigfoot is still walking, still watching, still knocking. Last October, I went back to the outcrop. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd find something, some sign that they were still there. But the rocks were empty, the clearing overgrown. The forest had reclaimed it. I sat down on the same rock where I'd waited all those years ago, and I closed my eyes. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. I listened, hoping for a hoot, a knock, anything. Nothing came. When I got back to the cabin, there was a basket on the porch. Old, weathered, falling apart at the seams. Inside was a single carved bird, like the one the big Bigfoot had given me, but smaller, more delicate. I picked it up, turned it over. On the bottom, scratched into the wood, was a symbol, a circle with 3 lines radiating from the center. I don't know what it means, but I kept it. That night, I heard the knocks again. 3 of them, soft and distant, like they were coming from miles away. I opened the door, stepped out onto the porch, and looked toward the trees. The moon was full, the clearing bathed in pale light. And there, at the very edge of the shadows, I saw a shape. Just for a moment. Tall, broad, watching. Then it was gone. I stood there for a long time, on the carved bird in my hand, before I finally went back inside. I don't expect to see them again. I think they've moved on, deeper into the wilderness, away from roads and cabins and people like me. But sometimes, when the wind is right, I catch that smell. And I know they're still out there, still walking the ridges, still watching over the forest. Bigfoot. I've thought about what I'll leave behind. Not much in the end. The cabin, some old tools, boxes of photos no one will look at. But I'll leave the video and the carvings and the baskets. I'll leave instructions for David to find them after I'm gone. I don't know what he'll do with them. Maybe he'll think I lost my mind up here, alone in the woods for too long. Maybe he'll burn them, or donate them to some museum that'll label them as folk art. Or maybe he'll watch the video and he'll see what I saw, and he'll understand. I like to think he will. Last week I was out by the woodpile when I heard a sound, a low whoop rising and falling, echoing through the valley. I stopped, axe in hand, and listened. It came again, closer this time. I set down the axe and walked toward the trees. I didn't go far, just to the edge of the clearing, and I waited. The kid stepped out. It wasn't a kid anymore. It was nearly as tall as I am, its shoulders broad, its fur thick and dark. It looked at me, and for a moment I thought it might speak. But it didn't. It just reached into a pouch at its side and pulled out a bundle wrapped in bark. It set it on the ground, nodded, and walked back into the forest. I picked up the bundle. He unwrapped it. Inside were seeds, dozens of them, smooth and brown, still fresh. I took them back to the cabin, planted them in the small garden I keep behind the shed. I don't know what they'll grow into, but I'll tend them, and I'll wait. That's all I can do now. Wait and remember, and listen for the knocks, because even if they never come back, I'll know they were real. Bigfoot was real. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I prove it? Why didn't I call someone, show the footage, make people believe? Because it wasn't mine to prove. It was a gift given in trust, and I wasn't going to repay that trust by turning them into a spectacle. I've lived a long life. I've seen enough to know that some things are better left unsaid, some mysteries better left unsolved. The world doesn't need another grainy video, another blurry photo, or another story dismissed as a hoax. The world just needs to leave them alone. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the porch with a whiskey and I think about that first morning. The fog, the basket, the smell of wet fur. I think about the kid and the big Bigfoot and the circle in the snow. And I smile. Because for a little while, I wasn't alone. I was part of something bigger, something older, something the forest had kept hidden for as long as people have been telling stories. I was trusted, and I didn't betray that trust. If you're out there listening to this, and you've had your own encounter, I hope you'll do the same. Keep it quiet. Keep it safe. Let Bigfoot remain a mystery. They deserve that much. The knocks came again last night. 3 of them, slow and soft, barely audible over the wind. I didn't get up. I just lay in bed, listening until they faded. This morning there was nothing on the porch. No basket, no carving, no prints in the dirt. Just the cold air and the quiet. I made my coffee, sat in my chair, and watched the mist burn off the valley. The forest is still there, dark and deep, holding its secrets. And somewhere in those trees, Bigfoot is still walking. I don't expect to see them again. I'm old, my knees hurt, and the stairs are getting harder to manage. But that's all right. I had my time. I saw what I saw, and I'll carry it with me wherever I go next. If you're ever up near Darrington, up in the Cascade foothills, and you hear 3 knocks in the night, slow, deliberate, patient, don't be afraid. It's just them checking in. And if you're smart, you'll leave a little something on the porch. Coffee grounds, maybe? Or a bit of bread. They'll appreciate it. I know I did.